The crowd had gathered in the great courtyard of the alien queen's palace. The sky was dark with smoke, and the smell of burning wood and oil filled the air. Torches lit the wide stone walls, throwing long shadows across the faces of the people who had come to watch. At the center of the courtyard was the fire pit, a deep circle filled with rising flames that hissed and roared like a hungry beast. In chains stood a young alien girl, her skin pale with fear, her eyes wide and shining with tears. She was thin, weak, and bruised from days of imprisonment. The guards pushed her forward, their armor clinking, their weapons ready. The people watched in silence, afraid to speak, afraid even to breathe too loudly. High above, on her throne of black stone, sat the queen. Her crown glowed with red jewels, her sharp eyes filled with cold pride. She raised her hand, and the crowd fell completely silent. Her voice was strong, echoing across the courtyard. "This traitor," she declared, pointing at the girl, "refused to bow to me, her queen, refused to follow the will of the throne. For her defiance she will burn, and let her death remind you all. None disobey me and live." The people lowered their heads, not in sorrow but in fear. No one dared to save the girl. No one dared to even whisper against the queen's command. The guards moved to push her into the pit. The flames rose higher, hungry for her body. But then, something happened. A figure stepped forward from the crowd. It was not an alien, not one of their own. It was a human. The people gasped in shock. Humans were rare here, strangers from the stars. This one was tall, his hair dark, his clothes simple but strong. He looked at the girl, then at the fire, then at the queen. The queen narrowed her eyes. "Why do you step forward, human?" she asked, her voice sharp. The human did not answer. Instead, he walked slowly toward the fire pit. The guards moved to stop him, but he brushed them aside with surprising strength. He reached the chained girl, standing in front of her like a shield. The crowd murmured, confused. "Is he mad?" One whispered, "Why would a human care for her?" Another asked. But the human stood firm, his face calm, his eyes steady. The queen leaned forward, curious and angry. "You dare stand between my judgment and her punishment?" she demanded. The human finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "She does not deserve this." The queen's lips curled into a cruel smile. "And who are you to decide who lives or dies?" she asked. The human did not answer her. Instead, he stepped closer to the fire, his body tense, his jaw tight. The girl cried out, "No, don't!" But the human ignored her. The guards reached for him. But he moved quickly with one bold step. He entered the edge of the fire pit. The flames licked at his boots. The heat burned the air around him. The crowd gasped in horror. Some turned their faces away, unable to watch. But the human did not scream. He did not stop. He stepped fully into the fire pit, standing inside the flames. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The girl stared at him with wide eyes. The queen gripped her throne, her smile fading. The people held their breath, waiting for the human to fall and burn. But he did not fall. He stood tall, his silhouette surrounded by fire. The flames danced around him, but he did not scream. His eyes locked on the queen, steady and unbroken. The queen's expression shifted from anger to curiosity. The crowd whispered louder now. "Is he protected?" One asked, "Is he blessed by the stars?" Another whispered. The human raised his voice, strong enough for all to hear. "If you want to punish someone, punish me first," he said. The words echoed like thunder in the courtyard. Even the flames seemed to pause, their crackling softening for a breath of silence. The queen rose from her throne, her cloak trailing behind her. She looked down at the human standing in the fire. Her eyes narrowed, her thoughts hidden behind her cruel smile. For the first time in years, she felt something she had not felt before: doubt. The alien girl's chains rattled as she leaned forward. Her heart raced, her hope returning like a faint light. She whispered softly, almost too quietly to hear, "Why would a human risk his life for me?" But the human did not answer her. He simply stood in the fire, silent, strong, unyielding, and in that moment, the crowd knew this was no ordinary man. This was a human willing to burn for someone else. The queen lifted her hand, halting the guards. She wanted to see how long he could last. She wanted to see if the fire would finally consume him. But deep inside, she felt a dangerous thought creeping into her mind. What if the fire could not? The fire roared, the heat twisted the air. Yet the human stood tall inside the pit, his boots blackened, his skin damp with sweat. But he did not scream, he did not kneel. The crowd could not believe their eyes. Whispers spread like waves across the courtyard. "Impossible," a voice muttered. "No one survives the fire," another said. But there he was, surrounded by flames, standing firm as if the fire itself feared him. The alien girl watched with wide eyes, her breath shaking in her chest. She did not know his name. She did not know why he had come. But in that moment, hope flickered in her heart, a hope she thought was gone forever. High above, the queen rose from her throne, her jeweled crown catching the firelight. Her cold eyes narrowed as she studied the human. She had ruled for decades. She had seen warriors beg for mercy, leaders bow at her feet, but never had she seen someone step willingly into her flames. The queen raised her hand, and the flames lowered slightly. The crowd gasped, as if the fire itself obeyed her will. "Human," she said, her voice sharp. "Why do you do this? She is nothing, a traitor, weak and disobedient. Why throw away your life for her?" The human looked up at her, sweat dripping down his face. His voice was steady, calm, carrying across the courtyard. "She does not deserve to die." The queen laughed, a sound like broken glass. "You think you can decide who deserves life and death in my empire?" She mocked. "You think your word matters more than mine?" The crowd fell silent, waiting for his answer. The human did not argue, he did not shout, he only said, "I will stand in her place if she must burn. Then I will burn first." A sharp gasp ran through the people. Even the guards shifted uneasily. It was madness. No one had ever spoken to the queen like this. No one had ever dared to challenge her judgment. The queen's smile faded, but her curiosity grew. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. This human was different, stubborn, fearless. Killing him instantly would be easy, but far too simple. Her mind turned, sharp as a blade. If he wanted to save the girl, let him prove his worth. Let him bleed, let him break. Let the whole empire watch him fail. "You wish to protect her?" the queen said at last, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Then prove you are worthy. I will not let you die so quickly. Instead, you will face my trials." The crowd stirred, shocked. The trials were legendary, impossible tests of strength, wit, and survival. No one had ever passed them all. Many had died screaming. And now the queen offered them to a single human. The queen stood tall, her cloak swirling behind her. "If you survive my trials, she will live. You will both be free. But if you fail, you will die slowly. And she will burn anyway." The alien girl's chains rattled as she shook her head. "No, don't agree." "You will die. No one survives the trials." Her voice was desperate, filled with fear. But the human turned to her, his eyes steady, his face calm. He gave her the smallest nod as if to say, "Trust me." The queen saw it and her lips curled into a cruel smile. "You accept?" she asked, her voice almost taunting. The human spoke without hesitation. "Yes, I accept." The courtyard erupted with noise. Some laughed, some cheered, some whispered that the human was already dead. The guards dragged the girl back in chains, while others moved to escort the human from the fire pit. The flames hissed as he stepped out. But the people could not forget the sight. They had seen him stand in the fire and live. The queen raised her hand and silence fell again. "Then hear me. All of you," she announced, her voice strong. "This human has chosen the trials. He will face them one by one. And you will all witness his end by tomorrow's sun. His ashes will scatter across my empire." The crowd cheered. Though many faces were uncertain, some looked at the human with awe, others with pity. The alien girl trembled, torn between fear and hope. The human, however, showed no fear at all as he was led away. The girl whispered to herself, "Why him? Why would a human risk everything for me?" She clutched her chains, her heart pounding. And for the first time she prayed not for herself, but for him. The queen watched them go, her sharp smile never fading. She believed she had set the perfect trap. The trials would destroy him, break him piece by piece, and yet, deep inside, a shadow of doubt lingered. What if he survived? The next morning, the courtyard was once again filled with people. The news had spread through the empire like wildfire. A human had stepped into the queen's flames and lived, and now he would face her deadly trials. Every alien from nobles to beggars came to see him fall, for no one had ever survived the trials. The arena had been prepared at the far end of the palace. It was a massive stone circle, its floor covered in sand stained dark with the blood of those who had failed before. Weapons gleamed on racks along the walls, and cages rattled in the shadows filled with snarling creatures. But the center of the arena was empty. Waiting for its next victim, the human walked in calmly, his eyes scanning everything. He wore no armor, no shield, only simple clothes and a pair of worn boots. The guards laughed as they shoved him forward. "This one won't last a minute," one muttered. But the human did not look at them. He only looked at the queen who sat high above on her throne, watching. The alien girl was chained beside the throne, forced to witness. Her heart pounded in her chest as she whispered to herself, "Please, please survive." The queen raised her hand and spoke, her voice sharp and cold. "First trial, the trial of blades. Let us see how long a human lasts against my warriors." A gate opened with a heavy clang. From it marched 6 alien warriors, their armor shining, their faces hidden behind helmets. Each carried a curved energy blade that hummed with deadly light. They spread out in a circle around the human, their steps slow and confident. The crowd cheered, chanting for blood. The alien girl closed her eyes for a moment. Unable to watch, when she opened them, the human stood perfectly still, his hands loose at his sides, his breathing calm. The queen's smile widened. "Begin," she commanded. The first warrior lunged, his blade flashing. The crowd leaned forward, certain the fight would end instantly. But the human moved faster than expected. He ducked under the swing, grabbed a handful of sand, and threw it into the warrior's visor. The alien roared, blinded, stumbling backward before he could recover. The human kicked his legs out from under him, sending him crashing into the sand. The crowd gasped in shock. No one had ever seen such tricks, dirty, simple, but effective. The second warrior came charging, swinging wildly. The human grabbed the fallen alien's weapon and blocked just in time. The clash sent sparks flying. The energy blade buzzing in his hands. He was no trained soldier. But his grip was strong, his stance steady. The fight turned into chaos, blades flashing, sand spraying. The human ducked, rolled, struck with fists and elbows. He used the arena itself, throwing sand, slamming one warrior into another, never standing still for long. Where the aliens relied on strength and skill, he relied on speed, cleverness, and sheer stubborn will. One by one, the warriors fell, groaning in pain, their armor dented, their helmets cracked. The human stood over them, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, the borrowed blade still in his hands. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some shouting in disbelief. The queen's smile faded just slightly. She had expected him to fall quickly, but instead he stood tall, alive, victorious. Her sharp eyes turned to the alien girl. The girl was staring down at the arena, her lips parted in awe, her eyes wide with hope. The queen's jealousy burned hot in her chest. This human had not only defied her fire, but also humiliated her warriors. She would not allow him to win too easily. She rose from her throne and lifted her hand. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise of the crowd. The arena fell silent, all eyes on her. She pointed at the human with her jeweled finger. "You have passed the first trial, but do not mistake luck for strength," she said coldly. "The next trial will break you." The human did not answer her. He only lifted his chin, his gaze steady. He dropped the blade into the sand and stood unarmed again. The crowd murmured in confusion. Why discard the weapon? But the alien girl understood he was making a statement. He did not fear what came next. The guards rushed into the arena, dragging away the fallen warriors. The queen's cloak swirled as she turned back to her throne, her mind racing with cruel ideas. She would not let the human inspire her people. She would make an example of him. The alien girl leaned against her chains, her heart hammering for the first time since her capture. She felt the stirrings of something dangerous. "Hope," she whispered softly. Maybe he can do it." But as the cages rattled and the growls of unseen beasts filled the air, even she began to wonder. How long could one human fight against an empire? The arena still smelled of blood and smoke. The sand was dark where the human had fought, the crowd still buzzing with disbelief. A human, just one, had defeated 6 armed warriors. It was something no one thought possible. The queen sat on her throne, her jeweled fingers tapping the armrest. Her eyes never left the human who stood below. He was bruised, breathing hard, but his back was straight and his gaze was steady. She hated him for that calmness, hated that her people were whispering his name. She raised her hand for silence. "You have survived the trial of blades," she said, her voice sharp. "But you will not leave here alive." The crowd cheered, some out of loyalty, some out of fear. The queen leaned forward, her smile returning. "Bring him to the hall. Let us honor him with a feast before his next trial." The guards led the human through long stone corridors, torches flickering along the walls. The alien girl was dragged along too, her chains clinking against the floor. She glanced at the human every few steps, her heart filled with confusion. Why was he still alive? Why was he still fighting for her? The hall was vast, its ceiling high, lined with banners of the Queen's victories. Tables groaned under the weight of golden plates filled with meat, fruits and steaming bowls of soup. Cups sparkled with thick red wine. Their aroma sweet and rich, the crowd gathered again, eager to see what the Queen would do next. The human was placed at the center table, the alien girl chained beside him, though she was not allowed to touch the food. The Queen raised her cup, her voice echoing across the hall. "Let us celebrate the courage of this human. Let him eat, let him drink. For tomorrow he will meet his end." The people cheered, though their eyes stayed fixed on the human, some with respect, others with hunger for blood. Servants rushed forward, placing plates of roasted meat before him, cups of wine, and fruits that glistened with strange colors. The human looked at the food, his expression calm, but inside his mind was sharp. He knew this was no reward, this was a trap, the alien girl whispered to him softly, so the guards would not hear. "Don't eat, it's poisoned. Every feast given to prisoners is poisoned." Her voice trembled with fear, her eyes begging him to believe her. The human gave her a small nod, then lifted a piece of meat from the plate. The crowd leaned forward, eager to see him swallow his death. But he did not eat it. Instead, he held it between his fingers, pretending to study it. Across the table sat one of the Queen's guards, his helmet off, his face pale and nervous. The human looked at him directly, then smiled without warning. He tossed the piece of meat into the guard's cup. The guard froze, the crowd murmured. "Eat," the human said quietly, but his voice carried across the silent hall. The Queen's smile flickered. The guard looked up at her, panic in his eyes. She raised an eyebrow, her voice cold. "Eat," she ordered. The guard obeyed, swallowing the meat and drinking the wine. At first, nothing happened. Then his face twisted in pain. His body shook, he gasped, fell to the ground, foam at his mouth, and lay still. The hall erupted in chaos, gasps and shouts filling the air. The human placed the cup back on the table calmly. His voice was steady, his eyes fixed on the Queen. "You wanted me to die like a fool," he said. "But I don't play by your rules." The Queen's hands tightened on her throne, her nails digging into the stone for the first time. She felt anger rising like fire inside her chest. She had been outwitted in front of her people. Her plan, her feast, her poison, it had failed. The alien girl stared at the human with wide eyes. Her heart pounded as she whispered, "You knew. You saw it." The human glanced at her, his lips curving into the smallest smile. "I pay attention," he said simply. The Queen rose from her seat, her cloak swirling behind her like a storm. "Enough games," she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. "You may have tricked me once, but you will not trick me again, guards. Take him back to the pit. The next trial begins at dawn." The crowd roared, some cheering for the Queen, others whispering that the human could not be killed. The alien girl was dragged away, her eyes never leaving the human's face. And though she was still chained, still weak, something had changed inside her. Hope no longer flickered, it burned. The human walked calmly as the guards pulled him back to the cells. His mind already preparing, he knew the Queen would try harder, and he knew the next trial would be worse than any before. But he also knew one thing. He would not let the girl die no matter what came next. The cell was dark, damp and cold. The human sat on the stone floor, his back against the wall, his wrists tied with iron cuffs. The sound of dripping water echoed through the silence. Somewhere far above, the crowd still celebrated, but here it was quiet, heavy with shadows. Beside him, chained to the wall, sat the alien girl, her wrists bruised, her body weak, but her eyes alive. She kept looking at him, as if she could not believe he was real. At last she spoke, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you fight for me?" "You don't even know my name." The human lifted his head, his eyes calm though his body ached from battle. "I don't need your name to know you don't deserve this," he said simply. The girl lowered her gaze, her lips trembling. "No one has ever stood for me before, not even my own people." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of chains rattling as she shifted. Finally she whispered, "My name is Lyra." The human gave a small nod, repeating it quietly, Lyra, as if sealing it into memory. She looked at him again, her eyes glistening in the dim torchlight. You could leave me, you could save yourself. Yet you don't. The human's voice was steady, almost gentle. I don't leave people to burn. For the first time, Lyra felt warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire pit. Her eyes softened, her chains heavy but her heart lighter than before. Hours passed, the night deepened from their cell. They could hear guards laughing outside, could hear the scrape of weapons being sharpened. The queen was preparing something cruel, something worse than before. Lyra shivered, fear creeping through her bones. She turned to the human again. Tomorrow, they will try to kill you again. He did not deny it, only gave a faint smile. Then tomorrow I'll survive again. Her throat tightened, tears gathering in her eyes. You don't understand. No one survives all the trials. It is impossible. Even the strongest warriors fail. They make each trial deadlier than the last. The human leaned his head back against the stone wall. His voice was calm, quiet, but firm. Impossible doesn't mean anything to me. Lyra stared at him, her heart beating fast. How could one man speak so easily against death? How could he look at fire, blades, and poison without fear? She felt her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with something else, something she could not name. She whispered, You're not like the others, are you? The human chuckled softly, though his eyes stayed serious. No, I'm human. For a moment silence returned, heavy and warm. Then Lyra leaned closer, her chains clinking as she moved. She lowered her voice. I wasn't lying. I refused to bow to her. That's why she wanted me dead. I couldn't kneel to a queen who burns children, who poisons her own people. Her words shook as she spoke, her anger and sorrow spilling out. The human listened quietly, his jaw tightening. When she finished, he nodded once firmly. You did the right thing. Her eyes widened, tears slipping down her cheeks. No one had ever told her that before. Her people called her a traitor. The queen called her defiant, but this human, this stranger, looked at her and said she was right. She wanted to speak again, but footsteps echoed down the hall. Guards appeared, their armor clinking, their voices mocking. They slammed the cell door open and threw in a bowl of stale bread and water. Eat, little traitor, one sneered. Tomorrow you'll wish you had. The human waited until they left, then slid the bowl toward Lyra. Eat, he said simply. Her eyes widened. But you, he shook his head. You need it more than I do. She hesitated, then took a small bite. The bread hard and bitter, she chewed slowly. Watching him in the dim light, her chest tightened again. This time with guilt and warmth both. No one had ever given her food before, not like this. Not when they were starving too. When the silence returned, Lyra whispered, If you die tomorrow, I'll never forgive myself. The human turned his head, his eyes meeting hers. I'm not planning to die, he said firmly. And somehow, against all reason, she believed him. She closed her eyes, letting her head rest against the wall, her body weak, her chains heavy, but her heart beating faster than ever. For the first time since her capture, she did not feel completely alone, and for the first time, she wanted to live not just for herself, but for the human who refused to leave her behind outside. The torches burned low. The night deepened, but in the darkness of the cell, a bond had been forged, a bond stronger than chains, stronger than fear, and by dawn it would be tested by fire once again. Dawn broke over the alien city. The sky glowed with red light, as if even the heavens waited for blood. The queen's palace was alive with noise, drums echoing through the streets, horns calling the people to gather once more. Today was the final trial, and no one expected the human to live through it. The courtyard filled quickly, thousands pressing against the stone walls to see. The fire pit roared brighter than ever before. Its flames stretched high, hungry and wild. The heat could be felt even from the edges of the crowd. Whispers passed from mouth to mouth. He cannot survive this, someone muttered. He stood in the fire once, another argued. But this is different. They will burn him alive, a third whispered. Shivering, though the air was hot, the queen sat on her throne, her crown glinting like fire itself. Her smile was sharp, cruel, yet there was a shadow in her eyes. Twice now the human had humiliated her, survived her blades and exposed her poison. She could not allow him to inspire her people any longer. This time she told herself he must die. The gates opened, and the human walked out, his steps slow but steady, his body marked with bruises and scars from the trials. Yet his head was held high, his eyes fixed on the flames. The crowd grew quiet as he approached, the weight of his presence pressing over them like a storm. Chains rattled as Lyra was dragged to the side of the pit, forced to watch, her face pale, her lips trembling. She wanted to scream, to beg, to throw herself between him and the fire, but the guards held her tightly, mocking her with cruel grins. The queen raised her jeweled hand, her voice strong. Today the fire decides. If the human is truly strong, let him walk into the sacred flames. If he survives, both he and the traitor girl may go free. If he fails, her smile widened, then their screams will be their farewell. The crowd cheered, though unease stirred among them. Some had begun to respect the human, others feared him, but all of them wanted to see what would happen when he stepped into the fire once again. The queen gestured, and the flames roared higher. The pit seemed alive, a monster waiting to devour. The heat burned across the stones. Licking at the human's face as he approached, Lyra cried out, "No! Don't do it! You can't!" Her voice cracked, filled with despair. But the human only glanced at her, his eyes steady, his lips forming words she could barely hear. "Trust me." Then he stepped forward. The crowd held its breath as his boots touched the edge of the pit. The flames hissed, the air shimmering with heat, and with no hesitation he walked into the fire. The world seemed to stop. The flames curled around him, swallowing his body in their orange glow. Lyra screamed, tears spilling down her cheeks. The queen leaned forward, her cruel smile trembling at the edges. The people gasped, waiting for his cries, waiting for his body to fall, but no cries came. Through the fire, a shape stood tall, unmoving. The flames bent around him. As if pushed back by an invisible force, the human stood in the heart of the pit, his face calm, his eyes sharp as steel. The crowd erupted into chaos, voices clashing. "Impossible! He does not burn. He walks with the fire itself." Lyra's tears froze on her cheeks as she stared, her heart hammering. The flames that had once meant her death now danced harmlessly around the man who had chosen to stand for her. Hope blazed in her chest, stronger than the fire before her eyes. The queen rose from her throne, her voice sharp, desperate. "This is a trick. No one defies the sacred flames." But her words rang hollow, even to her own people. The human raised his voice, cutting through the noise of the crowd. "You rule with fear," he shouted. "But fear ends today. Fire does not scare me, and it should not scare you." His words struck the people like thunder. They looked at each other, fear in their eyes, but also something else, courage. Murmurs rose, growing louder. If fire cannot burn him, then maybe the queen is not as strong as she claims. The queen's hands clenched the throne, fury burning hotter than the flames. Her voice cracked like a whip. "Silence. He is nothing, just a human, nothing more." But the people did not fall silent this time. Lyra cried out, her voice clear. "He is more than human. He is proof the queen's power is not absolute." The guards tried to silence her, but the crowd had already heard. A spark had been lit, and it spread quickly. The human stepped out of the fire pit, unburned, his figure glowing with heat. The crowd bowed their heads, not out of fear, but out of respect. For the first time in years, the queen saw her people kneel to someone other than her. Her heart pounded with rage, her voice broke with fury. "Enough! Guards, kill them both!" But the guards hesitated, their eyes shifting between the queen and the human who had just walked through fire. Their loyalty cracked, their hands shook. The queen saw it, and for the first time in her reign, she felt true fear. The human reached Lyra's side, his hands breaking her chains as if they were nothing. She stumbled into his arms, tears still on her face. "You came back," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. He looked at her, calm and steady. "I told you, I don't leave people to burn." The flames roared behind them. But the empire itself was about to burn, not with fire, but with rebellion. And it had started with one human who dared to step into the pit. The courtyard shook with the roar of the crowd. They had just seen the impossible, a human walking through fire untouched. For years, the people had bowed in fear before the queen. But now, for the first time, they bowed out of respect to someone else. The queen's face twisted with rage. Her jeweled crown glimmered under the firelight, her hands gripping the stone throne as if she could crush it. She screamed, her voice sharp and furious. "Traitors! Do not look at him. He is nothing, just a man of flesh and blood. Obey me." But the crowd did not obey. They whispered to one another, their fear turning into courage. The fire did not burn him. Maybe the queen is not chosen by the flames after all. She lied to us. The queen's eyes burned with fury. She turned to her guards, her voice cracking like a whip. Kill them. Kill the human and the girl now. The guards lifted their weapons, but their hands shook. Some took a step forward, then stopped. The memory of the human standing inside the fire burned in their minds. Could they raise a blade against him now? The human stepped forward, Lyra beside him. His voice was strong, steady, cutting through the queen's anger. You have ruled with fear long enough. You burned the innocent, you poisoned your own people. But today, your fire ends. The crowd erupted with cheers, though fear still lingered in some faces. The queen rose from her throne, her cloak swirling like a storm. Her voice thundered across the courtyard. If fire cannot kill you, then my blade will. With a scream of rage, she drew her sword. It was no ordinary blade, it glowed with red energy. The weapon of a ruler, forged in sacred flames. She leapt from her throne with unnatural speed, swinging the blade toward the human. The crowd gasped. Lyra cried out, Look out! But the human moved quickly, the queen's blade slicing only air. He caught her arm, twisting her wrist, forcing her to stumble back. The queen snarled, her strength fierce. Her attacks relentless, blow after blow, the red blade cut through the air, sparks flying as it struck the stone ground. The human had no weapon, but he used what he had, speed, focus, and the will to win. The fight raged in front of the fire pit, the queen's blade flashing, the human dodging. Countering with fists and throws, the crowd watched in silence, every strike echoing in their chests. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the soul of the empire. Lyra pulled at her broken chains, her voice trembling but strong. You can do it. Don't let her win. Her words carried across the courtyard, reaching ears that had long been silent. The people began to chant softly, then louder. Human, human, human. The queen's eyes widened as she heard it, her strikes growing more wild, more desperate. You will not take my throne, she shrieked, but her fury made her careless. The human saw his chance. As the queen swung downward with all her strength, he sidestepped and grabbed her wrist. With one swift move, he twisted, forcing the glowing blade from her hand. It clattered across the stones, the energy fading as it hit the ground. The queen gasped, stumbling, her crown slipping. She looked up at the human standing over her, his chest rising and falling, his eyes calm. The crowd fell silent. Holding its breath, the queen hissed, her voice trembling with rage and fear. Do it, kill me if you dare, but if you do, you will be no different from me. The human stood still, the silence heavy around him. Then slowly he shook his head. No, he said quietly, but the word carried across the courtyard. I am nothing like you. He turned his back to her, walking toward Lyra. The people gasped at his choice. He spared the queen, though he had the chance to end her. But before he could reach Lyra, the queen screamed in rage. She lunged for the fallen blade, desperate for one last strike. The crowd shouted, warning him. But Lyra moved first, still weak, still trembling. She threw herself forward, grabbing the weapon before the queen could. Her chains clinked as she lifted it with all her strength, pointing it at the ruler who had condemned her to die. Her voice rang out, clear and strong. Your reign is over. The queen froze, her eyes wide, her power crumbling in an instant. The crowd erupted, voices shouting, cheering, stamping their feet. The guards dropped their weapons, some kneeling, others turning their backs on their queen. The human helped Lyra stand, his hand steady on her arm. The fire pit roared behind them, but its flames no longer seemed threatening. They were no longer symbols of fear. They were symbols of change. The queen was dragged away, her screams lost in the cheers of her people. For the first time, the empire was free from her shadow. Lyra turned to the human, her eyes shining with tears. You saved me, she whispered. You saved all of us. He shook his head, his lips curving into a faint smile. No, he said softly. We saved each other. The crowd surged forward, voices lifting in unity, no longer afraid, no longer silent. They shouted the name of the one who had walked through fire. They shouted the name of the human who had shown them courage. And as Lyra stood beside him, free at last, she knew that the day the human stepped into the fire pit was the day the world had changed forever.